Hello, everyone. I am Tam Gonzalez, and today we are back with Lisa Marie Wand. She is our commercial real estate absolute ninja. She's based out of Reno. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, a master's degree in Business Administration. Her career started in 2003 when she purchased a brokerage in downtown Reno. She is licensed in California and Nevada and focuses solely on commercial real estate with Chase International. And today, she is going to be giving us a gold mine of information about 1031 exchange. So that's a term that has really become just an everyday phrase in real estate, and everybody throws it around. But most people, when you get down to it, don't actually know how to do it or what it means. And she is going to clear that up for us today.
Yeah, thanks for the great introduction, Tam.
Absolutely.
So we're going to get right into it. 1031 exchange, like Tam said, you hear this term thrown around all the time. It used to be very elusive. Now you hear it a lot. But do people really know what it means? I don't think so. So we're going to talk about it today. And the other thing is, because these commercial 101 videos are geared towards everyone, but specifically towards residential real estate agents, my goal is to make you as a residential real estate agent look absolutely fabulous. And so if you have a general idea of what a 1031 exchange is, you're also going to look like a ninja and a rock star to your clients. So I want to give you enough information that you can have a conversation. And then if things start to get complicated, then you can refer them to me or another commercial real estate broker that you know, like, and trust in your area. So what is a 1031 exchange? So 1031 exchange is actually a powerful provision that comes out of our IRS tax code. And a lot of people don't know that. Like, you hear about 401k. When it comes to investing your money for retirement, that's also a tax code, just like 1031. And it's been in the tax code for a really long time. Like, can you guess, Tam, when you think that 1031 came into our IRS tax code? Just guess, because I didn't know.
So. 50 years ago.
1921.
Wow.
So this is like not a new thing, right?
This is like a staple.
Yeah, this goes way back. It's old school. So the purpose of a 1031 exchange is to allow a real estate investor or a business owner to defer paying capital gains tax when they sell a property. So it doesn't get rid of capital gains tax, but it actually defers it to a later time. And so you don't pay it when you sell or exchange the property. You pay it at a later date when you actually sell the property for cash. So in this case, a business owner or an investor is exchanging one real property for another type of real property. And that is called like kind. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But essentially, it's pretty broad. One type of real property for another type of real property as a business owner or an investor. So that's kind of the basic piece of it. And I want to talk about what's the rationale, or what's the reason why someone would want to use a 1031 exchange.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that, because I think it's something that's misunderstood a lot of times. And is capital gains just flat across the board and it'll never go up? Because one argument that I've heard in the past is, why would you not want to pay taxes now and wait till taxes can potentially go up years down the road and then you get hammered?
Right. So one of the rationales for using a 1031 exchange is to avoid capital gains taxes that are increasing. So capital gains taxes have increased over time, and they've also added another tax that's called a net investment income tax, which is another 3.8% that goes on the top. So depending on the investor or the business owner, it may be more beneficial for them to push that capital gains tax off to a later time, even if it is going up. Whatever their particular goal is, their financial goal or their investment goal, they may not want to pay that money right now. And so if that is a really good reason with taxes increasing, to defer that to a later time and go through a 1031 exchange. So if you have a taxpayer who owns an investment or a business property and they're seeking to reduce the tax that they have to pay now, a 1031 exchange is a perfect process for them to go through. So they won't pay it now when the property gets exchanged for another property, but they'll pay it later. And with the market, the real estate market, the way it is now, with inventories low and prices are increasing, that's another kind of rationale why people may want to roll one property into another for an exchange.
So you can get more bang for your buck, essentially use that money as buying power rather than paying your taxes.
Yeah, so it would be considered what they call investment liquidity. So you don't have cash, but you have liquidity moving from one investment property to another. And there's lots of other reasons why people might want to use a 1031 exchange. Like, here's an example that I can think of. If you owned a office building in a part of town that wasn't growing and as up and coming, maybe as another area, and then you wanted to exchange that for, let's say, a retail strip mall that's in a better area that's going to generate more return and more rent for you, that would be a perfect reason to do an exchange. And so you're taking one type of real property, exchanging it for another, and you're deferring those capital gains tax to a later time.
So even though you're going to end up potentially paying a little bit more in taxes, your profitability also goes up.
Right. So it's those long-term versus short-term goals, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. So we already talked about what is a 1031 exchange, and then we briefly touched on why would someone want to do a 1031 exchange. What's next?
So I'm going to hit on like the top kind of 9 things that are good to know about a 1031 exchange. And these are the kind of little snippets or bullet points that a residential real estate agent can pick a few of these and remember them so that when they're having a conversation with someone, it makes them look like they really know what they're talking about. And it's a good conversation starter if you're at a networking event or if you're with clients and you're driving them around looking at houses. You can talk about 1031 exchange. It's another way to open up that door to having conversations about, are they investors or business owners? And could you maybe offer them some commercial real estate?
Absolutely. I feel like that's kind of a code word for, hey, I know a little bit about commercial investing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and last time we talked about cap rates. And so I gave you some really simple calculations that you can do. Last week, I had some investors here from California. It was a group of pilots that have gotten together and pooled their money, and they're going to start buying some small multifamily properties. And we were standing out in front of one of these properties, and I had just enough information that I could get on my phone and use my calculator and talk to them about the cap rate. And those were exactly the things we talked about in the last broadcast.
Wow, that is so cool.
Yeah, so here we go. The first bullet point, the thing that's important to remember is that a 1031 exchange is not for personal use. So you notice I've said business owners and investors. A 1031 exchange is not for you to take the house that you live in, that's your primary residence, and exchange it for another primary residence.
I think that gets mixed up with, avoiding capital gains when you've been in your residence for 2 years or, whatever the law is at that time. I think people think that's the same thing, and it's not.
It's another layer of the tax code that talks about being able to move around the capital gains when you've lived in your primary residence for 2 out of the last 5 years. So that's one way on a residential level that you can avoid the capital gains tax. And so what we're talking about is on the business and investor side. So those things could work together, for one of your clients. So no personal use on a 1031 exchange. We are going to briefly touch on swapping vacation homes. That'll be the last part of what we're going to talk about today. There's a loophole there. It's much more narrow, but it can be done. So, but that's still not your primary residence, right?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions on that one?
I think that's pretty straightforward.
That's pretty straightforward.
So personal property no longer qualifies. Did they qualify at one time?
So prior to the end of December of 2017, there were certain types of personal property that would qualify for a 1031 exchange. And some examples of that would be if you owned a franchise license. So let's say, Tam, you owned a bunch of Burger King and you wanted to exchange a franchise for another franchise or for something else. You used to be able to do that. Also things like aircraft. So if you own a plane or certain types of large pieces of equipment, those used to be eligible for 1031 exchange. And as of the end of December of 2017, they're no longer. eligible for the most part, and there may be some exceptions to that. It's all about real property at this point.
So that's a major shift, huh?
Yeah. So imagine like big corporations that owned, franchises and airplanes and different types of equipment, and they're getting the tax benefit of all these exchanges. A lot of that has gone bye-bye.
Wow.
As of the end of last year.
That doesn't make sense to me on a franchise. I mean, because it's actual property. Like if you owned a bunch of Burger Kings, it would be a bunch of properties, but I guess you're talking about just owning the franchise versus the buildings, right?
Right. So it's tangible versus intangible property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see how that would be huge though for bigger corporations.
Yeah. Or someone that was like the Burger King or, owned a bunch of, what are some big Wingstops, McDonald's, 7-Eleven, who knows?
And I know you were planning on getting a much bigger jet this year, and that's probably not going to happen either.
Darn.
Dang it.
I should have done that before the end of last year.
I know.
What were we thinking? Changed up my jet.
So like kind is a really broad term. What does that actually mean?
So like in the beginning, I was talking about real property exchanged for real property is essentially what a 1031 exchange is, but they use a phrase, and they being the exchange services and people involved in 1031 exchanges, there's a term called like kind. So that means that you're going to exchange one type of property for something that is of a like kind. And the guidelines on that are so vague that I really lean back into what I said in the beginning, which is real property exchange for real property. So let me give you an example. So you could exchange an apartment complex, which would be an investment property, for a big piece of, let's say, retail raw land that was going to be developed. That would be considered like kind. Now, that doesn't fly in my mind, because when I think of like kind, I think, well, you're going to take an apartment building and you're going to buy another apartment building, right? Mm-hmm. But that isn't necessarily true. A couple of the exchanges that I did recently, I had a client in California who sold a rental home that was worth multiple millions of dollars at this point in the market, and they exchanged that with me for an apartment complex in Reno. So that under the guideline for the 1031 is considered like kind property. Or for example, if you had an office building and you exchanged it for a retail strip mall, so that would still be considered like kind. So it's very vague. As long as it's not your primary residence and it's real property, for the most part, you're going to be covered.
Okay. So that's kind of in a gray area, like open for interpretation. As long as it makes sense, you could probably plead your case.
Yes, exactly. Because you have to meet certain criteria, and you're probably going to work with an exchange service, which is a company that acts as the intermediary for the exchange. Because if you ever touch the money, like let's say, for example, you're doing exchange, you're taking your real estate brokerage office building and you're exchanging it for something else. If you touch that money, then the exchange is over. You can't do it. So it has to go into an intermediary bank account to be held until the exchange is completed.
I've heard that. Yes.
You can't touch it.
Can't touch it. Can't even do a little shopping. Nothing.
Sorry, Tam.
So we can do a delayed exchange. What does that mean?
So especially in this real estate climate, it might be virtually impossible for you to find the exact property that you want right as you're selling the one that you want to exchange. So it would have to happen like seamlessly, like a ballet, and at the same time. So you can imagine, based on low inventory, rising prices, all the things that's happening across the United States, that in most situations that's not going to happen. So you can do something called a deferred exchange. So that is when you sell the property that you're exchanging, and then that intermediary service, the exchange service, comes into play. So when that property sells, the money goes into like a trust account, at the exchange service. And then there's some very important time frames that come into play when you're doing a delayed exchange. Pretty much every exchange that I've worked on has been a delayed exchange, because while the property is being sold, I'm helping my clients identify new properties, and but they haven't purchased a property at the same time that they're getting rid of the one that they want to exchange. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it wasn't
Okay.
seamless, like the proceeds just went immediately to another purchase. There was a middle time.
There's a delay. Yeah, there's some lag time. So that's when we bring the third party in, the exchange service, into the situation. So here's what happens. Your office building sells, the money goes into the exchange service, so there's that no touch rule. It stays there, and then as soon as the property sells, the day it sells, the time clock starts ticking. So this can be the nerve-wracking part for people, for all the parties involved in the exchange, is that there's a time clock that's ticking, and you have 45 days to identify new properties that you might purchase. It doesn't mean you have to purchase all of those properties, but you do have to identify them in writing. Not only identify them, but give a real property description of what the property is and submit that in writing to the exchange service. Now, there are some guidelines around how many properties that you can identify, and I don't want to get too complicated here today, but the main rule is that you can identify up to 3 properties.
Okay. So, and you're doing that and just kind of putting it on the radar and putting everybody on notice that you're on track, that you're working diligently to essentially spend that money.
Yes, exactly. So you have those 45 days. So you're working with a commercial real estate broker. You're out there hunting for properties that would be a viable exchange. And then those have to be submitted. That there's a deadline. So if you don't have 3 in, or if you want to swap one or whatever, after that 45 days, that's it. You're stuck to your list. And in order to complete the exchange, you'd have to purchase one of those 3 properties.
Wow. Okay. So
yeah,
this is serious business. This is not just pick a few names out of a hat and give it to the company.
Yeah, and this can, this is not for the faint of heart, because, there's some pressure involved. You feel that time commitment. I know for sure my clients feel it when we're going through this process. It's like, because what if something that you want to buy that you identified gets sold, or something happens, or it's not on the market anymore? So it's really important you do a good job of honing in on what your client wants and what they need and what their price point is, so that those properties can be identified in a timely manner.
Absolutely.
So we talked about the delayed exchange, and then we actually just rolled into the 5th item on my list today, which was that you have to designate the replacement property. So there's another rule about the designated replacement properties, and that is it can be, I think it's up to 200% in value of the original property. So, but I would just, for kind of beginner understanding, is you can identify up to 3 properties.
Okay. And those can they be at equal value, or do they always have to be a higher value?
They don't have to be a higher value, but one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit later on in this broadcast is about what you have to spend. So because there's, tax ramifications here, we want to make sure that whatever is going from one property to the next in the exchange, that all the funds are being utilized appropriately, and we're going to talk about that.
All right. So not only do you have to identify those 3 properties within a certain time frame, you also have to close it within 6 months. And is that on the deferred exchange, or is that just the regular exchange?
So that would be part of your deferred exchange, right? Because if those were happening simultaneously, then you wouldn't have to worry about the 6 months. So you sell the property, the time clock starts ticking, 45 days to identify your properties. And then the total time that you have to complete the transaction is 180 days, which is 6 months.
Wow.
So those time periods run concurrently, Tam. So that means the 45 days is part of the 180 days. So
okay.
I think of it like this. You have 180 days total. You've got 45 days to identify the property, and that leaves 135 days to complete the transaction.
Okay.
It has to be closed within 180 days from the day the original exchange property sold.
So this takes some skill. This takes some finesse. This takes some know-how.
Exactly. And, real estate, you never know what can happen, right? Most real estate transactions are not a slam dunk. That's why you hire professional real estate agents, realtors, and brokers for clients to help them through the transaction, because there's always twists and turns. And so I had a deal that was an exchange that just closed last month, and we thought we had plenty of time, but then there was a hiccup in the transaction. There was an environmental piece to the transaction that triggered a whole bunch of stuff that had to happen, and we were literally like down to the wire. So imagine if your client goes through all of this for the exchange, and then you close a week after the 180 days, and then they don't get to have any of the tax deferred benefit that the exchange provided. So,
wow. And there's no possibility of a second extension, or no way around that, huh?
No, the IRS tax code, the 1031 code, is very specific about these time constraints. So as a residential real estate agent, if you just remember a few things, let's just kind of recap so far. You can't use personal property. You can't use your personal residence. You have to have a like-kind property, which is a very broad rule. You can do a delayed exchange. You have to designate 3 replacement properties as a general rule, and you have to close the transaction within 6 months. So that may sound like no big deal, but as you know, we've talked about, and from your experience, commercial real estate transactions have a longer timeline. Mm-hmm. And so that 6 months can go by really quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can see how you would need to be really diligent and on top of this transaction.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to mention here is that in a commercial transaction, especially if I'm the listing agent, I put together a transaction timeline, which is an actual document, or it could be a spreadsheet. But we take the purchase and sale agreement and we break all the contingencies and all the dates onto an actual spreadsheet, so we keep each other, or all the parties keep each other kind of in check, along with the lender, the exchange service, and the title escrow company. To make sure that all the contingencies are met so we can move forward. And in a case like this with the 1031 exchange, super important that everyone's aware of the dates.
Absolutely. And that's a really great way to keep track of it all.
Definitely. Yeah. Do they do transaction timelines in residential real estate usually?
I don't see a lot of other agents using them, but I print one out on every transaction and fill it out as I'm going. And I have it with me I keep digital copies of everything for my clients, and then I also, reluctantly do keep a hard copies of everything in my files as well. So
that's why you're so good at what you do. That's why you're so good at what you do, is because you're so organized. It's super important.
Yeah, I want to always be able to have everything that I need on me in case a client calls me or has a question, or in case. It is so easy to lose track. Even as a residential agent, I've got 6 open escrows right now and 4 offers out. So if I didn't have those things, I might not be able to access that information as quickly.
Yeah, so you understand. You're a seasoned realtor in Las Vegas. You're making it happen. You're out there doing deals, and so it's so important. I would encourage residential real estate agents like you do to have a timeline, even if it seems like a very simple transaction, just to keep everybody on point.
Lisa Marie, it saves me so much time, because even something as simple and insignificant seeming as filling out an addendum or a counter offer where it requires the original date of the contract.
Yes.
If you just have that timeline, it's right there, easy to access, instead of digging through your files or pulling something up electronically just to check what date you wrote the original contract on. So it really does save time.
I've seen people do that, and it's kind of funny that you're scrambling through your paper or through your whatever documentation program that you use. And also, I share that timeline with my clients because, real estate clients, especially on the commercial and investment side these days, are super savvy. I think home buyers are as well, and home sellers are as well. So when I share that timeline with my clients, that it's a whole nother level of accountability, because they're like, hey, we're coming up on this date, what do I need to do? What do you need to do, to keep us, are we on track? And it's cool.
Yeah. I've never actually shared that timeline with any of my clients before, but I'm going to do that. That's a great idea.
It shows that you're a pro, that you're organized, that you're on top of it. And it's also a layer of transparency that can engage them in the process and also let them know that, you know, I'm holding myself accountable by giving this to you, and that also they can be a part of the process instead of just a bystander.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I think that's an extra piece that I'm definitely going to add in. I think that's an excellent idea.
Awesome.
I always learn so much from you, Lisa Marie.
Oh, vice versa.
So if you receive cash, it's taxed. So when you buy your next investment property and then you buy me a new Louis Vuitton bag, then if you use that cash to buy that bag for me, you're going to get hit with some taxes. Right.
Exactly. You might even get hit with tax twice. You might get hit with tax when you sell the house, and when I buy you the Louis, I might have to pay more tax. It better be a really nice Louis, okay?
Right?
I'm
really
just saying.
Nice.
We don't want any last year Louis for that.
No.
So what that means, and I'm going to introduce a new term here that most people probably haven't heard. It's a 1031 exchange term. So let's take an example. You have a property. You sell that property and you make $1 million on the property. If you roll that over in the exchange to the new property and you only spend $100,000, so $1 million, if you only spend $900,000 of that million on the new property in the exchange, then there's a difference of $100,000. That would be called the boot. That's the term they use. That means you get taxed on that. So it's really important when you're looking at the properties and you're identifying them that you make sure that whatever property you're going to exchange and roll over into, that you're going to use any and all cash proceeds from the initial sale. Otherwise, and sometimes people don't use all the cash, and they have that boot and they know that they're going to get taxed on it, but maybe they want to use it for something else. But whatever's left over will have the capital gains tax and any other tax that applies to that person or that business entity will come off the boot.
Okay. That's such an important piece to know, though, that can be done if you're willing to deal with the tax consequences on whatever part that you cash out on, essentially.
Yeah, well, if I wanted to buy you like a whole bunch of Louis, I could take that $100,000 boot, you know, and say, this is what I'm going to do with it. But think of an investor or a business owner. Maybe they want to take that $100,000 and roll it back into their business to buy equipment, or they want to pay off some debt, or they want to leverage that for something else. It wouldn't make sense to leverage that for other property because you could buy more than one property in the exchange. In the example I gave you, if there's $1 million in profit from the exchange, they could take that and turn that into 2 properties. It doesn't have to be one. But the goal is to use as all the money or as much money as possible from the original sale.
For something that's so strict and rule-oriented, there really actually is a lot of flexibility in it.
Yeah. Well, think about it. When it just says like-kind exchange, you have so many options of what you could do.
To me, that means anything I want to buy.
Except for a Louis.
Except for Louis. Yeah.
Because the personal property, generally speaking, the personal property rule doesn't apply anymore. So it needs to be real property for real property. But think of all the different kinds of real property you could buy.
Yeah. I mean, as long as it's an income producing real property, you could be like, I mean, it's an income producing real property. That's what it is. That's how they're alike.
Yes. And if it's not an income producing property for an investor, if you're a business owner and you're exchanging one, let's say where you do business for another place where you do business because you're growing and you want something bigger or you want it in a new location that's a more up and coming location, then you could do that as well.
That makes a lot of sense. So we covered cash. Now, the next one is you must consider mortgages and other debt. What does that mean?
So, like, let's go back to our $1 million scenario, right? So we sell a house, let's say it's a $3 million piece of property, a rental home. You sell it, and after you pay off all the debt, you have that $1 million cash left. So we for sure need to use the $1 million cash to buy one or more investment properties in the exchange. But here's the deal. In this example, you had a $2 million mortgage on the property. So you paid off a $2 million mortgage. So when you leverage into this new property or properties, not only do you want to use all the cash if you can, but you also have to switch that mortgage or that loan or that debt over to the other properties. And you have to have the same amount of mortgage or the same amount of debt in the new properties. So it's kind of like if you had a $3 million house and you had a $2 million loan, then when you roll into these new properties, the total debt needs to equal that same amount.
Okay. So we need a $2 million mortgage.
Yeah. And so what we do is we do a calculation where we'll look at, with these new properties, are we going to use all the cash and are we going to have the appropriate amount of debt? And I think part of it comes down to keeping the economy moving, because if you just pay off the mortgage and then you're just rolling in cash,
okay,
I can see how on a bigger picture they want to keep the economy stimulated and keep those loan dollars moving forward.
That makes a lot of sense. And so you're not even saying that, let's say we sell a $3 million building with a $2 million loan on it, that we have to go buy another single building and put a $2 million loan on it. Could we have $3 million worth of total property that have mortgages that equal $2 million between all of them?
Right, exactly. And so when we talked about the boot on the cash side, so you had $1 million profit, but you only spent $900,000, you'd have that $100,000 boot and you have to pay taxes, because there may be different levels of tax depending on the type of entity and where you live. Same thing with the mortgage. So if you had that $2 million mortgage that you paid off, but then on your new property, you only had a $1.8 million mortgage, then that's also a boot. That $200,000 difference in debt ratio would also be taxed.
Wow. So would it be taxed at the capital gains rate? Is that?
As far as I know, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so then that's not even money that you're getting in hand. It's just money that's not mortgaged.
Right.
That's a little twist.
Yeah. So you have to kind of mirror, if you use all your cash or there's a penalty, and you have to use the same amount of debt or loan on the new properties in order to have a complete deferment of tax. Some people are okay with just a partial amount, like, the difference between that $1 million and the 900,000 was 100,000. Some people are okay with paying the boot or the tax on that. Same thing with the loan. But if you want a 100% tax deferred 1031 exchange, you need to have the same amount of debt and use all the cash.
I mean, it makes sense. To me, it sounds like a win-win. To me, it sounds like it was at least structured with that intent, was for it to be a win-win, for us to get a tax break, but to also have to, in return, stimulate the economy.
Yep. That's how I look at it as far as the exchange goes, is because you're not selling your property for cash, you're just taking real property for real property, and your terms are, maybe your interest rates and all that stuff can be different, but the meat and potatoes of the deal are similar.
That makes a lot of sense. I think the only part that's kind of strange to me is the fact that you could end up paying taxes but never actually receive a dime of money. Right? So
in the case of the loan, that's true.
Yeah. So you buy $1 million property, you take out a $900,000 note, and then you're going to get hit with the capital gains on that $100,000 for the cash that you took out, right? If there was extra cash, or if there was a deficiency in the loan for that $100,000, you're paying taxes on the $100,000, but you never actually received the money.
Because they're either going to get it now. When I say the IRS is either going to get it now or they're going to get it later. Because think about it this way, like, let's reverse this thing. And you do pay that $100,000, the tax on that $100,000 penalty of that amount that you didn't have a loan on, but you're going to pay that much less capital gains on the back end because the property's worth less. So they're either going to get it now or they're going to get it later. And that's why it has to just be pretty much like for like. You're either going to pay the tax now or you're going to pay the tax to Uncle Sam at some time in the future. So
you might as well use the buying power now.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. That makes sense. So do you want to talk about 1031 exchanges on vacation homes? Because I know you said those could be tricky.
Yes. So we talked a little bit about, like you mentioned, capital gains. So if you have your primary residence, you and your spouse, and you've lived there 2 out of the last 5 years, and you can avoid capital gains on your private residence. but let's talk about vacation rentals. So there's years ago, I don't know, 2003, 2004, the government changed these loopholes around vacation rentals because people were kind of trying to fool the system on vacation rental. So let's say they buy a vacation home and say they're going to rent it out and they don't, then it's really not a vacation home. And then they move into it. Once it becomes your personal residence again, then you have to pay capital gains tax on it. But the way that you could exchange a vacation rental is, let's say you have a vacation rental in one city and you rent it out at least 6 months of the year, and then you want to exchange up or to a different location for another vacation rental. You'd have to follow those same guidelines. And there's not a specific time frame, but I would say if you stay with that 6 months out of the year of renting it, then that could qualify for an exchange of a vacation rental. But if you're a person who says this is a vacation rental, but you never rent it out, then you could lose that 1031 exchange benefit by trying to work around the system. And you can have a vacation rental that you buy with the intention of years later, you're going to move into it and it will be your primary residence. Like if you retire and you want to go to a more like to Florida or Palm Desert or whatever. But then once you move in and you that becomes a primary residence, then it could be eligible for capital gains at that time. So the reason I'm talking about this is because the IRS watches this sort of stuff, and you have to follow the guidelines to be eligible for the 1031 exchange. So if you're trying to look for a workaround with a vacation home, I just say be very careful. Make sure it really is a vacation home and that you're renting it out.
So this might be just a tiny, tiny bit off subject, but so if the requirement is approximately 6 months out of the year, how do people handle that situation if it's like an Airbnb or a rental situation where you're not renting it out for chunks of time or blocks of time? You might rent it out for 2 days a week or 1 day a month. But what if it's completely and totally your intent to be using that as a vacation home? But as far as number of days, you can't show that it was rented out for at least half the year, but it was obviously rented out.
Yeah, well, so there's no absolute standard that I'm aware of, and I'm not a CPA. So, but I think as long as you have the intent to rent it out and you can show that you've been marketing it, then I think you'd be okay.
So this can't be, I live in Las Vegas, this is my house, and I bought the house next door because when I go on vacation, I'm going to stay there. And then
can you see like your wheels get turning, like how people could really bastardize this vacation rental guideline? That's why they have more loopholes for exchanges on a vacation rental, because people may just say it's a vacation rental, but they just go there like. And there's been instances I've heard of where people do a 1031 exchange and it's supposed to be an investment property and they turn around and move into it. And then if you get caught, then you have to pay the price.
Got it. So
always be
just
honest.
A quick question. Would this count for somebody? So let's say like Matthew has a client that has a home here in Las Vegas and he's only here 2 weeks out of the entire year, every year. Multi-million-dollar home. It just sits there all year long. Because he lives in the house 2 weeks out of the year, is that not going to count for the 1031 vacation home exchange if he decides to sell?
I don't think so. So that's when these exchange services come in really handy. They have them all over. And there's a couple that I work with, and they can do exchanges, throughout the United States. They don't have to be geographically located where you are, but you talk to a registered exchange service that's what they do, that's what they specialize in, and talk to them about whether you're going to meet the guidelines, or talk to your CPA about it as well to make sure that you're meeting all the criteria and doing everything you're supposed to do to keep everything on the up and up. Just like we are in real estate, we have a duty, a fiduciary responsibility to be honest and forthright and disclose. You want to help your clients do the same thing.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I'm actually going to talk to him about that today. Because in that scenario, profitability aside, it might be worth it for him to Airbnb that place, at least while because he's out of the country the majority of the time. I mean, what does he care anyway? So he doesn't need the money, but he might care about that tax ding he's going to take whenever he sells.
Exactly. Or if it's furnished because he comes and stays here sometimes, he could hire a property manager or a company to rent it out as an executive rental and, maybe meet that kind of, like I said, there's no absolute standard, but he could have someone in there with income coming in for at least part of the year so that he might be able to use that as an investment property to exchange instead of selling it and paying capital gains.
Excellent. I love it. I always walk away with so much after we do these calls together.
Oh, thank you.
So obviously this is not just for my personal gain and benefit. The goal here is to help other residential real estate agents in Las Vegas and really in Reno so that we can all be empowered with this information so that we can start these higher level conversations with our clients about investing in 1031 exchanges and cap rates, all for the goal of hopefully becoming a one-stop shop for our clients so that we can get those commercial, land, industrial, all those transactions also, and have a resource that we can send our clients to where we can work hand in hand while learning the process, all while offering our clients something that you really don't find this level of diligence every day in our marketplace. So, I mean, Lisa Marie, just the way that you break things down and the tax knowledge and the cap rates and everything that you have to offer is on such a bigger scale than the majority of agents that are out there practicing. So really just want to commend you for that and thank you for the opportunity.
I appreciate that. And my higher vision with doing these broadcasts with you is exactly what you said. I've been successful in real estate, in commercial real estate, and I want to be able to give back some information to the residential agents to empower them with enough knowledge so that they feel comfortable to start the conversations. I know a lot of residential agents, I'll ask them, do you have any investor or business owner clients? And they're like, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable talking about it. It's way over my head. It's out of my league. And yes, we're always supposed to work within our scope of expertise and not outside of that. That's like you've heard me say today, I'm not a exchange service. I'm not a CPA. I'm not an attorney. However, I want to empower residential real estate agents to start having conversations. I want them to look like an expert in their field, and then they have me as part of their team so that they can hand off these commercial and investor clients to me. I can do what I do. I can work my magic. That's why they call me Magic Wand. And then these residential agents get to, with the same size sphere that they currently have, can increase their income substantially, their bottom line at the end of the year by making this referral and being a part of my generous referral program. Then they also get to retain those clients. So whenever they want to buy or sell another house or refer residential clients to them, I'm not after your client. I'm here to help you and help your clients on the commercial and investment side specifically. So I want us to be a successful team and be able to help our clients to the highest degree and the highest level possible.
That makes so much sense. And you're already a resource for me, even though you're in Reno. We talk about deals together all the time. And yeah, I do what you and I are talking about. I do that with an agent here in town. His name is Matthew Beach, and we partner on commercial and industrial and land type deals. And he's a huge resource for me. But really, this is about collaboration, not competition. And that is something that sometimes takes a little bit of time for us to learn in real estate, because when you come out of real estate school, you think that it's a competition with everybody else, with all the other agents, and everybody's fighting for business. But that's so far from the truth, because we're all so different. We're not going to want to work with the same people, and the same people are not going to want to work with all of us as far as on the client side. But on the agent side, we can all collaborate and we can all work together. And for the most part, agents are my biggest resource. When I have a listing or a deal, I'm calling all my agent friends to help me, and that becomes your source. So nobody has to have everything mastered. It's almost impossible. And what I've found is when I'm completely forthright with a client and say, you know what, to be 100% honest, I'm not necessarily qualified to take that commercial listing, but I work hand in hand with somebody who is. We do everything together. We've done X, Y, and Z, and I name a few transactions and just start talking about it. And they're actually happy to hear that I'm not going to just try to fool them into thinking that I'm completely capable of handling the transaction, that I'm going to focus on what I'm excellent at and bring somebody in that's excellent at that piece of the puzzle that they really need, and that we can work hand in hand. And they're always impressed. They always love it.
Exactly. And we've all seen what happens when that scenario you're talking about, where a residential real estate agent goes, oh yeah, I can take that commercial listing, and inevitably some type of disaster will ensue. So they haven't given the best level of service to their client, and they haven't done a service to our industry, because, you know, as a whole, real estate agents are not at the top of the highly respected list. And I want to do everything in my power to further the reputation and the level of service and expertise and knowledge that realtors as a whole provide. And so when someone can say, hey, I have a partner in commercial real estate, same thing with me. Like if I have a residential deal and it's not something that's related to an investment for some reason, then I pass it along to someone that I know, like, and trust in the area. And so this is how we help our industry as a whole, and how we help our clients, so that they can get the most money and have the best experience and come out with whatever their real estate goals are on top.
Absolutely. And you just touched on something that I think is so important, and we really haven't mentioned it that much. So you can just close your ears. This will be an inside tip to the agents. But if, you know, me as an agent, if I was watching this and listening to this, not only would I be thinking of, you know, how can I get some deals in Lisa Marie's hands so I can get paid, but how can I build a relationship with her and show her that I'm an excellent agent, so that no matter what, whenever she gets a residential listing, she sends it to me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Double game plan.
Exactly. And so I'm licensed in California and Nevada. I do commercial real estate in both states. I'm based in Reno, Tahoe area. But, you know, we collaborate. Like, you live in Las Vegas. We talk about deals all the time. So you can have connections with other real estate agents that are not even in your specific area. And I think that's a benefit, to have expertise from different markets and connections in different markets. Like, you and I just talked about a potential commercial real estate deal this morning, just, you know, getting ready, set up for this. I'm like, hey, I've got this thing. And you're like, I've got this thing. And so we can make our sphere of influence and our geographic area of influence larger just by reaching out and talking to other real estate agents. Like you said, it's not about being afraid. You know, we all have our focus. Mine happens to be commercial real estate. You focus specifically, like, you're the guru for Silverado, right? Inspirata. Sorry. Silverado. Inspirata in Las Vegas.
You're close.
Yeah. So, you know, we can work together and benefit each other. It's not about taking away from someone else, or like someone's going to steal your deal. We as real estate agents, I want to see us continue to operate at a very high level of integrity and authenticity and knowledge. And so that's my gift to whoever's watching this now or later, is specifically that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being open like that, because we've touched on this before, but a lot of times it is hard to get other agents to share openly and genuinely. You know, they'll give you little bits and pieces, or tell you in a way that's so complicated that they know you're actually never going to be able to do it. But this is very genuine. And I have to agree with you that I think we should all care about the integrity of our industry and our own personal integrity. And I know that none of us get it right all the time. We all have areas that we can improve on and that we sometimes could do better on, but it's a learning process. And I think when we put ourselves out there like we are doing today, and that we've done, you know, multiple times over the week, we really kind of extend that heart to everybody else and invite everybody to jump on the bandwagon and collaborate instead of competing.
Exactly. We all have a lot to share and to offer to each other. And I've always said there's plenty of business to go around. So I'm going in my 15th year in real estate, and I'm as successful as I want to be. And I do believe that there's plenty of business for all of us. It doesn't matter what your market is, if it's small or big, or there's inventory, or there's not, or whatever excuse or bullshit story you're telling yourself. The business is out there. Your clients are out there. And this heart connection that we're talking about, Tam, is how you connect with your clients and how your clients see that you're really genuine, and then they want to work with you. So if you take care of your clients will take care of you. And I know that to be true.
I know it to be true too. I think clients are they expect a high level of perfectionism, or just they expect a high level of service, but they don't expect perfectionism. They know that we're human, and I know that at least my clients, they like and respect the fact that I'm real. You know, that I
Right.
typically don't make promises that I can't keep. I'd rather disappoint them up front and then surprise them on the back end with something better than I promised, than promising a bunch of crap on the front end and then having total disappointment. So I think as long as your clients know that you're real and that you're an honest person, and that on a human level besides business you care, that is the momentum that you need to have underneath you at all times that will propel you forward.
Exactly. And with our clients, whether they're commercial or residential, getting more savvy every day because of the internet, because of the resources that are available, it wouldn't be unheard of to run across a client that knows more about real estate than you do. They just don't happen to be licensed, and it's not what they do for a living. So I think that it's important that we raise the bar just across the bar, that we raise that bar to continue to learn. And that's the purpose of this series, this broadcast series, is keep learning and growing, so we can choose to stagnate and stay the same, or we can choose to grow and expand. And I know that you and I are on that journey in our business and our personal life to continue to evolve, because if you don't evolve in today's market, then you die.
I couldn't agree more. And that brings up a good point. I switched brokers recently. So I'm with King Realty Group now. And just
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Nothing wrong with my old broker. I am just moving in a more technologically driven direction, and this broker was perfect for that. And just like you were saying, we need to adapt. We need to give more. We need to bring a higher level of service and integrity. And the reason that I made that choice is because that broker has all of that in the forefront of their focus and of their mind, and they are absolutely forging the way. And he's a young broker. His name's Ryan King. He's my same age. He's 37. He's all over Facebook. He's got the Facebook videos down, YouTube, Google AdWords. His software that he's built is vegasdata.com. That just outpowers the MLS times 50. I mean, what I can do on that site in 2 seconds, it would take me 20 minutes to do on the MLS. So just another example of somebody in our industry wanting to teach, share, expand, and bring us to a higher level.
Exactly. So you moving over to your new brokerage, to King, is going to allow you to provide even a higher level of service and knowledge for your clients. So good for you. It's not always easy to move, and there's a lot of moving parts with that. And so congratulations to you on your new shop.
Thank you very much. Yes. All right. Well, I think this is a perfect place to wrap up. Do you want to give us a little sneak peek into what our next video is going to be about?
Yes, I do.
Everybody's surprised.
So the next installment of our broadcast is going to be, what are some of the top questions that you as a residential real estate agent can ask to your clients that are potentially business owners or investors? We keep talking about having a conversation. So I'm going to give you some tools on how to have those conversations, and what are some of the good questions that you can broach and that you can ask to start a conversation about commercial real estate and about investing.
So you're going to teach us how to breach the sales conversation, and in the words of Molly Mahoney, without being a salesy weirdo.
Right. Yes, exactly. Right. It's about conversation, and it's about relationship, right? So these will help you to build some rapport.
Beautiful. I can't wait. So we're going to wrap it up. Why don't you tell them your phone number and how they can get a hold of you besides calling you?
Yes. So Lisa Marie Wand. I'm in Reno. You can reach me at 775-224-5300. You can also go to my website, lisamariewand.com. You can find me on Facebook. I look forward to connecting with you. Reach out to me anytime.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you.